Gloria in excelsis Deo, et in terra pax hominibus bone voluntatis. Well, I'm sorry to keep you waiting, but folks were arriving as I was sitting here watching the door, and I didn't want to leave anyone out, and I'll try and keep track as we go along. But I wanted to welcome you all. It's good to see you. Those of you that I can see up in those little windows there. We're kind of a low-tech group here. We are really primarily a Merton discussion group. We meet each month on the first Tuesday of the month to discuss a book that we're reading by Merton or about Merton. We've been doing that for about 30 years. Here comes somebody. Oh, Paul Pearson. Um, yeah, we've been doing that for about 30 years, first in our parish center, and then with COVID, we went online, and we've been online ever since. So if anyone on with us tonight would like to join us, we'd be happy to have you with us. Over the summertime, we're reading um, The Seeker and the Month. Seeker and the Monk, I should say. Seeker and the Monk. Okay. So this evening we have Dan Erwin as our guest. We occasionally have a guest speaker. We're happy to have Dan with us. Dan came to us by way of a member of our group who met Dan at a prayer group nearby. And I don't see that young man here online. I hope he's able to join us. Um, uh, so he met Dan and put me in touch with Dan, and we've had a couple of conversations with him, and we're looking forward to what he has to say to us tonight about his time at the monastery and his time spent with Thomas Merton as his novice master. So I should make mention that we have a couple of folks I should draw your attention to. Judith Valenti is here with us tonight, and she's the president of the International Thomas Merton Society. So we're happy to have her with us tonight. And I see Paul Pearson has signed in as well, and he's the director of the Thomas Merton Studies Center at Bellarmine College. So if you're probably familiar with both of those groups and places if you're here tonight. So um, and you know the benefits that they provide to us. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Dan, and Dan's going to tell us a little bit about his early life, his childhood life, and then take us on through to his going to Gethsemane. Okay, Dan?
Okay. Um, Good evening, everybody. Um, I started as a young child. My parents were Catholic, and I went to Catholic grammar schools, Catholic high school, Catholic college. Um, and at the age of 18, um, I decided that actually it was the age of 17. A buddy of mine, a classmate of mine, and I decided that we were going to go down to Gethsemane for a Easter retreat. And one of our high school teachers was a brother, and he told us that his parents lived in Louisville, Kentucky. So, and that they would be uh, happy to pick us up at the airport and take us around Louisville and close by areas to show us some of the sites like the what's the Kentucky Derby that
Churchill Downs.
Churchill Downs, yeah, and things like that. And then they drove us down to the Abbey. We did the retreat, and that was kind of like what finally decided on my part to try to join the Trappists. I read Thomas Merton's book, which was Seven Story Mountain, and which I'm sure a lot of people have read it and been moved by it. So that was another big factor in my wanting to join the monks. Um, so in my high school years, I was talking to the vocations director in the monastery on the phone, and he said that after when I graduate, I could make arrangements to come down and try it out. So that's what I did. My parents drove me down um, in at the age of 18, and my sister, and my
Wow.
kid brother, they all came with us, and
Okay.
and so then I was there to join, and that's what I did. I went in as a postulant, and my time there was I can talk to you about some of the things that I experienced in the monastery. Um, I kind of went briefly through my childhood. It was nothing unusual, really. We lived in Brooklyn, New York, and then we moved to New Jersey, and then back to Brooklyn, and so nothing different. I wasn't a very pious kid. I was kind of like a devil may care kid, but I learned to appreciate my faith after a while. And so when I got to the monastery, my parents stayed in the not the guest house, but a special building they had for parents and family members who had come with postulants. So the first thing I remember was I didn't know when they left, and then I was to go to the novices area. I didn't know how to get there, and I'm walking down the cloister, and the prior uh, s- called me in a room because you can't talk when you're in the cloister. So he called me into one of the rooms, and he said, "What are you looking for?" And I told him. So anyway, he helped me out, and I got there, and met the other novices, and met Father Walter, who was the novice master at the time. And I always like to remember they told me that he was a football player. Um, anyway, Father Walter was transferred to the New York monastery because the deacon the abbot there died, so they had to replace him. So they chose him to send up to New York to be the novice, to be the abbot, and that's when Thomas Merton came on as the novice master, and that was somewhere between October and December of 1955. Um, and so the rest of the year, the rest of my time there was under his uh, care as a novice master. Um, he had a sense of humor because one time he told me I was a stubborn cuss. And anyway, we would meet with him periodically for spiritual direction. And many of the things he told me in spiritual direction, I tried for the rest of my life to put them into practice. Some of the things were like forget yourself and don't say how am I doing. Forget about that. And then another thing he told me one time was that you make progress in the spiritual life by going backwards. And I never understood that, but I pondered it for many years, and I think I understood what he meant by that. We have to go backwards in our own opinion of maybe of ourselves. Um, and other things that he said were don't. And he told the whole group. We used to have like you might call it a class. Every day we'd meet with Father Lewis. That was his religious name, and he would give us a talk on different things. He one of the things I remember is telling us that um, we shouldn't try to overdo it when we're working. Some people get carried away and they just do they go to go too far. They're not supposed to. You're supposed to moderate your work, but you're supposed to work hard, but don't kill yourself, as some people might tend to try to do. Work harder than anyone else. Um, Let me see what else I have here. Yeah. Um, yeah, one time it was in the winter time, and as a penance, I was going out to the work when during the work period. I was out in the woods probably, and I didn't have any gloves on, and that was my penance. In the cold weather, I didn't wear any gloves. So then, when my next session with Father Lewis, where spiritual direction, I told him that, and he said to me, "Have the humility to wear gloves."
Mhm.
So for the rest of my life in the wintertime, I've always worn gloves. I made it a point. Um, he used to say, uh, let Jesus pick your crosses.
Oh.
So then I appreciated that. Um, uh, he said to us novices one time, we have to ask ourselves, who do you think you are and what do you think you're doing? To come to a reality of where we are and who we are and what we think we are and what we think we're doing. And I've often used that sometimes. I'm in the midst of something uh, very involved, and I'll try to
Mhm.
find out if I'm doing it out of humility or if I'm inflated with ego. Um, he told us to forget ourselves and don't ask how we're doing. Another directive he gave us was that we make progress, as I told you before, we make progress by going backwards in the spiritual life. Um, let me see, I had some other notes here. Um, we weren't allowed to talk to the other novices, nor to any of the other monks, except we could talk to the abbot. We could talk to Father Lewis. We could talk to the undermaster, which was Father John of the Cross Wasserman, and his function was to help Father Lewis when Father Lewis had to leave the monastery to go to maybe, let's say, a doctor's appointment or something up in Louisville. Um, then the undermaster would take over, and he would bring us out to the work site and bring us back and direct us while Father was away. It was only for one day usually, but he, um, he told me one time that we this was before the renovations of the church in 1955, and so the church was, you may have seen pictures of it. It was just as big as it is now, but they made a lot of changes and simplified it. It's very simple now, as to compare to what it was before. And I think Father Lewis had a lot to do with that because he was all for simplicity. And when the abbot decided that we had 200 monks there at that time, and I think that we had maybe 20 novices. I'm really not sure how many we had. I can see faces, but I can't count how many there were really there in way of the novices. But he was against doing away with the cows and the chickens and the pigs, and doing a business kind of thing where um, we would sell cheese, different kinds of cheeses, but we do it through the mail, and it turned out to be very successful. We'd have some chocolate candy that was laced with Kentucky bourbon, and that was popular. And so they did very well with that because the abbot was a graduate of Harvard Business School, so he was quite adept at doing things for business. Um, and but as I said, Father Lewis would have preferred the old-fashioned way, but it just wasn't adequate with all the mouths they had to feed and everything. So that's how they came to renovate the building. Um, see what else we had. Well, he would invite us to read whatever books that we might be attracted to. We had a little library in the where the novices were, and so we could look through the books there and pick one that maybe we thought we'd like. And he was perfectly okay with that. We would pick a book and read it, and then we talked to him about it when we went to him for spiritual direction. Um, let's see what else. We used to go out to the woods to do during cold weather actually to cut down trees. And one time we went out, and one of the um, one of the monks who had taken simple vows, he didn't take solemn vows yet, but he was studying to be a priest, and he took simple vows. And the tree he we used to have a big saw, a long saw, and there'd be one man at one end and the other at the other end, and we'd cut the tree so that it would fall in a certain direction. And one of the monks who was I just described, he cut his arm, and it was bleeding profusely, and everybody got very excited about it. They tried putting tourniquets on and everything, but he was laughing at it all. And his niece contacted me one time on the web when she heard about what I'm a part of now is the lay Cistercians. We're connected with Gethsemane, but we're lay Cistercians of Gethsemane, and we try to live the uh, the kind of life that they live, but not in the monastery, in the world. Given family and children and stuff like that. Um, and so that's what we do. We try to do. We follow a plan of life in the lay Cistercians of Gethsemane. And anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, so his niece contacted me about the lay Cistercians on the email, and then she told me who her uncle was. He had been transferred to Chile, and he wasn't in Gethsemane anymore, but she was going to go there to visit him. And so I said, well, you ask him if he remembers the time he cut his arm when we were in the woods, and everybody panicked except him. Um, so she did. And then when I heard from her later, he said, yes, I remember that very well, or I remember that. So that was it. Some of the novices were priests. There were two of them who were priests, and they wanted to become take solemn vows. I left, and so I don't know what happened to them, except that I heard one of them was Spanish, and he left the monastery, but he took part. He was a priest, but he took part in other good works. I forget what it was. He was working with children, and the sad thing is that he drowned. That's all I knew about those two priests. The other one had a wooden leg, and he was very handicapped. Um, so let's see what else about Father Lewis. Um, he was a very hard worker, and he used to go out in the field in the hottest day of the summer, and he'd have a big hat on, a straw hat, because he was virtually bald on top, so he wanted to avoid the sun on his head. And I remember looking over at him at that time, and he was working so hard. I think he was working harder than any of the novices that he had brought there. I mean, he wasn't killing himself, but he was really into what he was doing, and he was trying to do a good job. Um, so he was very conscientious about that. So that's sort of like a brief summary of my time there. Um, let's see. We had sometimes that we had other uh, people who would come to give the whole community a s- what do you call it? A 9 day retreat, something like that. And it was just that he would show up every day and give his talk to everybody in the church. And I know after I left, Bishop Sheen went there and did that, and he gave a retreat to them. Um, After I left, Father Lewis became a hermit, and he had a hermitage. Which every time we went down there for a retreat, uh, we they always took us to the hermitage to see where he lived. It was like a small house, and it had a living room and a place where he could say mass, an altar, and so he used to entertain a lot of famous people there, which surprised me, but he did. He'd have people who were very much against the war. He was himself very much against the Vietnamese War. And he'd have other people, some of them famous, who would come and talk to him, and he was allowed to do that. So um, then he left there, of course, and he went on the trip to Thailand and all. That was where he was, as I'm sure you all know, that's where he was electrocuted. So, but I was gone by that time, and I wasn't there at the time. But the ironic thing is that he was so against the war, but when they shipped him home from Thailand, I guess it was, back to the monastery, they shipped him back in a fighter plane that had been involved in the war. But that was rather unusual for him. He wouldn't have any parts of the war. Uh, so that's about it. Anybody have any questions?
Let's see now. How about we'll do it by chat? If you want to use the chat window and type out a question that you might have, so in case there are four or five people at once, you can we can call on you. Um, One fellow, Mike, is asking, what kind of work did you do after leaving the monastery?
We lived in New Jersey at that time, and I worked in what I had worked on in before I graduated high school, which was in a pharmacy. I was delivering prescription drugs to customers. And in those days, the pharmacy even had liquor, so I was also delivering beer and stuff like that. Uh, and I stayed in that job until we moved back to Brooklyn. We seems every 6 years we were moving back and forth from Jersey to Brooklyn. We may have been trying to escape our creditors. I'm not sure. But my father was an entrepreneur, and he didn't like working for anybody but himself. So he would open different businesses. He had a bar and grill in Brooklyn. He had a tile business in New Jersey in Paramus, and then he had another. After we moved back once again to Brooklyn, he had a luncheonette. So anyway, that's the work I did when I went back from the monastery, and that wasn't for too long before we moved back to Brooklyn, and then I got a job in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, with a business that made manufactured. It was a manufacturing company, and I worked in the office, and then from there I moved for other jobs, better jobs, and I finally got a job with one of the major banks in New York, and that was on Park Avenue and across the street from the Waldorf Astoria, and that was a good job. They sent me to Alaska when Alaska discovered oil, and not only me, but one of the vice presidents, or assistant vice president, maybe I don't remember. And then they also sent me to blue um, oil off the coast of Louisiana, where there was oil discovered. Well, it wasn't just discovered; it was there. But the major oil companies would come and give us uh, ask for checks uh, that were negotiable, but they were not filled out as to the amount. And then after they'd have a like um, uh, uh, people who owned the land were giving them the right to drill for oil. And so then they would tell us how much they paid. The winner got the one who said they would give the most is the one who got the rights to for the oil. So then they would come back to our hotel. They tell us how much they spent, and we would have to notify the New York, the government in New York, to tell them how much we had to put aside a percentage of that. So, and then that was probably the last job I had before we moved again to New Jersey. And
Hey, Dan, excuse me, Dan. Could you say something about Dom James?
oh, Don James, yeah, he was. I like Don James very much. I think I told Greg that when I first went there, the first day I was there, and I was sitting in his office next to his desk talking to him, and it was interesting. He always had a skull on his desk. There was always a skull, and I guess that was to remind him of where he was headed. But he told me an Irish joke. That was the first time I got to talk to him, and he told me an Irish joke. I don't remember the joke, but I laughed. But he was a very very kind guy as far as was concerned. He was very kind to the novices, and he was like a grandfather, is the way I looked at him. But he was very very kind, and I always liked him and appreciated him. And when I was leaving, he was very active in helping me, and we communicated for a short time after I left. But he was a good man and a very educated man.
Now you just say he was like a grandfather. What was the sign you said was on Father Lewis's door?
Uncle Louis.
Yeah, so you had a grandfather and an uncle there.
Yeah. Yeah, Father Lewis was Uncle Louis.
How about the discipline there, Dan?
Oh, about the discipline. Well, that was something we had to do every Friday after one of the hours that we prayed the Psalms. We had to go up to our where the novices lived and slept. Not lived. We didn't spend any time there except sleeping, really. But that's where we went, and we all had these little what do you call them? Cubbies or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. It was just like a little area about 4 feet by 6, 8 feet or something like that. And that's where they had the mattress where we slept, which had straw in it. It was straw in the mattress. But anyway, every Friday we had to go up there and take the discipline. And what that was, you probably have heard about it. I'm not sure, but it was a rope with several strands coming out, and we used to have to beat our shoulders with it for about, I'm not sure how long. It might have been 3 minutes or it might have been less. I don't think it was much more than that, but it really hurt. It stung something, So anyway, Father Lewis would be there, and he would stamp his foot. And that was the signal for all of us. We were all in our own little bedrooms, if you will. And that was the signal to start it. So then we'd start flagging ourselves with this rope. Um, and then he'd stamp again, and that was the end of it. Then we were finished for another week until the following Friday. But he said when he had us all together one time when he was giving us a talk, he said that somebody in the group, one of the novices, instead of beating himself with this thing. He was hitting his mattress, and he could tell that this one novice was whipping his mattress. Um, I don't know if he ever knew who that was, but he never said. Um,
How about the
so
chapter of faults, Dan?
okay, the chapter of fools, we would meet once a week. The monks, all the monks, the abbot was at his chair up in front of everybody else, and the prior was there. Everybody was there, and the novices and the postulants as well. I guess I don't remember the postulants, but I guess they were there. And what we had to do was we had to call attention to one of the monks that we had noticed either broke one of the rules or yeah, maybe did too much talking. We weren't supposed to talk. It was all sign language, and so we had to accuse that person of breaking the rule, and that person had to prostrate themselves on the floor and could never defend himself, even if it wasn't true. I mean, maybe it was misunderstood or whatever. They could never defend themselves. And but so that was called the chapter of faults. And I remember one time my parents and siblings came down to visit. We were allowed one visit a year from family, and we met another lay brother and his family, and we kind of chatted with them and made friends with them. And then when that was all over and the parents went home, um, at one of the following chapter faults, I accused him. I accused the brother that I had made friends with when the family was there, and and I don't remember what I accused him of, but he had to do the same thing, prostrate himself and all like that. I often wonder if he resented that from me, like so-called friend. But it was not anything very serious, you know. It was just you broke the rule, you broke the law, you talked, you did something you shouldn't have, or you didn't do something you should have, and that kind of thing, you know.
Dan,
So yes,
Dan,
sir.
could you tell a little bit about how you would get up so early? Could you kind of walk us through from two whatever it was in the morning throughout the day, your
Yeah,
prayer
yeah,
time, the liturgy of the hours, your meals? Could you kind of give us a rough idea of a normal day?
sure. Yeah, we got up at 2:15 to pray the first morning hour Latin matins. Um, and it was rather long, but it was two quarter after two in the morning, and then after that, we went to.
Dan, excuse me 1 second. How were you awakened?
Um, that's a good question. I think it was a bell.
Mhm.
I think it was a bell that we all could hear.
Okay.
Um,
I'm sorry to
so
interrupt you.
that's yeah. So we all hurried up and got up, threw on our habits and rush down to the church. Um, and then we would do, as I said, matins, and then after that we would go back to get to. I think we didn't go to breakfast at that point. I don't think we went to breakfast just before Lord's, and and then after breakfast, we went to the next hour of the liturgy, which was Matins, Lord's, terce, I think, and we do terce, and then by the time we finished doing all the hours that had to be done, and had breakfast and things like that, uh, then it was time to go to work. You know, so we all went out to work to different things. We all went to the same work site, but the work was different things on different days. We might be reaping potatoes out of the ground, or we might be cutting trees, or I don't know. There was something we used to cut. I don't know. I wanted to think it was alfalfa, but it was that wasn't the right name for it. We used to harvest that. And speaking of alfalfa, there was one of the monks there who was from the back country of Kentucky. He was, I don't like to say a hick, but he was kind of like that, you know. But I'm not going to tell you his name because he's still there. But they used to say to him, "Why don't you try to do the readings?" Because different days, different monks would get up to the ambo and they do the reading for the day. And so he said, "No, no." He said, "I can't do that." He had no confidence in himself. I don't know if he had any education or what, but they told him, they kept after him. They said, try it, you can do it. So finally, they talked him into doing it. And in fact, the scripture reading that he read was one that was just read one day this week, where Jesus says, "I am the Alpha and the Omega." Well, this monk read that, uh, "I am I am the alfalfa and the omega." And of course, the monks all snickered when he said that, but they didn't want to make it too obvious. But he was the alpha instead of the alfalfa instead of the alpha. But that just came to my mind when we were talking about what we do during the day. Um, yeah, and then when it was time for work, we went out for work. We worked for 4 hours, and then we'd come back and change our clothes. We had our denim um, clothing on when we went out to work and boots, and we'd come back and change into our habits, and then we'd go to I guess pray another hour of the liturgy, um, and that's about the way the day went.
Mhm.
It's always something to occupy us. We were never left to with nothing to do. If we had leisure time, maybe on a Sunday, we didn't work on Sunday. Well, then maybe we were free to go out and sit in one of the chairs out in the field or the grass or the area there and read a book, you know, something like that. But we were never allowed to work on Sunday. So we had that leisure time on Sunday. Some of the monks would take a walk into the woods, you know, and maybe they enjoyed that. I know Father Lewis liked to go into the woods, and that's where he told Father Dom James one time that he took Jesus with him into the woods.
Mhm.
So,
How about the quality of the meals, Dan?
well, they were simple. They were very simple. There was never any meat. um, or eggs, even though they had so many chickens. I guess they sold the eggs.
Mhm.
Um, so, but and then we had what was called coffee. It was a far stretch for coffee, but it was hot, and you know we drank that. It looked like coffee, but it didn't taste anything like coffee. And then at the during the meals, the main meal, which was around noontime, um, they had somebody reading a spiritual reading from they had like a
The lectern.
yeah, and so they would read to everybody who was there, which was everybody who had, it was in in the abbey, um, and then after that, what do we do after that? Well, I'll tell you something. When my friend and I went down there as juniors in high school to do an Easter retreat, um, we were led through some of the areas where the monks ate ate their meals and other places. But there was a separate kitchen, not kitchen, but dining area where monks could not eat the usual food that everybody else ate because they had issues, health issues. So they had to have special food prepared for them. And they were in another, right next to the main one, but a wall between them. And as they were leading us through this, there was Father Lewis sitting in one of his um, seats in the kitchen there, and he was eating. And I always remember he gave us a big wave as we went by. And we were only high school kids at the time. He gave us a big wave.
Hey Dan,
So,
I'm going to call on some folks that have sent in questions so that they can ask it themselves, if that'll be all right with you.
well, it's all right if I have the answer. Yeah,
Yeah, and there are quite a few, so maybe, we'll kind of zero in on the answer and then we'll move on to another question, okay?
sure.
So Judith Valente has asked a couple of questions. So Judith, if you will unmute yourself and you can make the comment you wanted to make earlier and ask the question you wanted to ask, if you would.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you, Gregory. I just wanted also to recognize Mike Brennan, who's on the call, who is the chapters coordinator for the whole International Thomas Merton Society, and he is just an icon in the Merton Society. So I wanted to wave Mike, wave to everybody.
Hmm.
There he is. Okay.
Mike.
My question is a simple one. What prompted you to leave the monastery, Dan?
Oh, I got sick. I got sick, and I was transferred from the monastery to a hospital in Georgetown Hospital. And one of the monks met me. The abbot put me on a plane, and then I got to Georgetown, and the at the airport, and Father, what was his name? You know,
John Hughes.
yeah, Father John Hughes met me there. He was studying in Georgetown at the time. He was a doctor before he even went to Georgetown, but he was studying more medical stuff. And so he met me there, and he kind of took me under his wing, and we were able to go and see a movie, uh, and funny movie about the Navy. Um, but the abbot told me that given my condition, I couldn't really come back to the abbot for a number of years. So,
Because you were just a kid. I mean, you were young still
well,
young.
yeah, well, I was 20.
Mhm,
I went in at 18.
mhm.
So anyway, wasn't happy about it, but I figured I don't have a choice. You can't argue with the abbot. So that's when I left, and my parents came in to the hospital and picked me up, took me home, and uh, and then I started a whole different life. But I never forgot the Abbey, and I never forgot the things that I learned there, and never will. And so that I never married. I never married. I stayed single, and I went back, as the abbot had said, not for a number of years. Well, you know how many years it was before I went back? 50. I went back. I went back 50 years later. Um, and I was taking a trip to visit my nephew and my godson and his wife in Chicago. And then I left them and I said to myself, well, I think I'll take a ride down to Gethsemane. And so I did. And I asked if I could do a retreat there. It was on a Monday morning, well, Monday. And I asked if I could stay until Thursday and do a retreat. And I was told, well, I don't think we have enough room. We're all booked. So I said, oh, all right. So then when he heard that I think that I'm speculating here, but I think when he learned that I was one of Thomas Merton's novices, he told me, I found a room for you. So I did a retreat there. And then I asked them if I could rejoin the monastery, and they said, "Well, uh, I had a job that had left for a long weekend, and I had to go back to the job. And I couldn't just abandon them. So they said I should go home and talk to my my employer and tell him that I was going to be away for a month. They suggested that I come back for 1 month to the Abbey and live with the monks and work with the monks and see if it fit. So I did. That's what I did. I went back. I think it was around the end of December after Christmas, I guess. I don't know. I can't remember those details. But anyway, I went back there and did the retreat. Well, not the retreat, but I did the 30 days. I started to do the 30 days and worked. I worked in the where they made the cheesecake and the the cheeses and stuff like that with the rest of the monks, and went to choir with them. I was had my own little thing right next to one of the other monks where we did the hours of the liturgy the hours, and so then I went back there, as I say, I think it was in December, and then one day the what was his title? He was the vocations director. He's still there, um, Father Luke, and he was a great guy. Anyway, he told me, you got to pursue your dream. So if you wanted to come back, then you got to pursue it. So I was pursuing it. That's why I did. I went back to stay there for a month, and in those days, the abbot would never make a decision about an individual joining their community by himself. He would get to it amongst all his monks and let give them the facts, and then let them all have their say, and then based on what their opinions were, he would make a decision. So his decision, I was told by the uh, the vocations director, was that I was too old. I
Mhm.
was too old. They needed younger blood there because I was 68 years old. And they said, You're too old." So I was kind of like insulted.
That's a young man by today's standards.
Well, yeah, I guess. But
Dan, Dan,
yeah,
you did hear from Father Lewis after you left.
I got a letter from Father Lewis, yes, because I wrote to him and I got a letter from him. And as I told Greg, I said, I don't know whatever happened to that letter, but it kills me that I lost it. We lived in Jersey at the time, and I distinctly remember putting it up on the shelf of one of the closets, clothes closets. And then um, we moved everything out, and we moved to Brooklyn. And that was the last I ever saw of that letter. And I had no idea whatever happened to it. But I would have treasured it if I had it.
But you remember the I mean, you remember the point of it, right? You remember what you took away from the letter.
Well, not really.
Oh,
Not really. I mean, I had written to him, told him what I was doing, where I was working, and so forth. And then his letter was very friendly and nice. And maybe at that point he reminded me I shouldn't be anxious about anything.
yes, yes.
Um, so, but I couldn't tell you what he actually wrote. I don't remember.
Yeah, okay. Let's see. Oh, Mary was asking a question about Father Lewis's sense of humor. Mary, you have no last name, so I'll just say Mary. Would you like to ask your question? And Dan will try and focus in on the answers because there are other people that have questions, and
Okay.
we'll try and get to them too. Mary, hello. Well, basically, she was asking if you remember anything more about Father Lewis's sense of humor.
Um, well, we had one of the novices there, as I know, as I remember or heard, he took simple vows, and he was very close to Father Lewis. Um, and Father Lewis used to tease him as a novice. Amongst the other novices, he would tease him because he had a big nose and it was always very red. So So that was a lesson in humility, I guess. I don't know.
That was easy pickings, that one. I shouldn't say,
Yeah,
I shouldn't say.
yeah.
Uh, Paul Pearson, you had a question, and if you were able to unmute yourself and ask the question, Paul.
Yeah, hopefully this is working. I had problems with my connection, so I turned the video off. Yeah, no, I was wondering what year you left, but you did mention that. But I
Mention
was
what?
wondering,
Go ahead.
um, yeah, sorry, were you aware of Merton's writing during the time that you were there? Did you connect things that he was teaching you with things that you would subsequently read in books?
Well, yeah, I'm sure we did because he was always in his office. You could hear his typewriter going a mile a minute, and and I had read his couple of his books before I went down there. So he would teach us what he believed, which is what he wrote, you know. Um, but I don't remember exactly what that was at any one of our meetings, what subject he did uh, talk on. He did say that um, we had to work hard. I know he told us that and work hard. He gave us a lot of directions, but it's like 60 some years ago. And I don't remember what he said as far as his books, but I know he was always in the type with the typewriter so you could hear it going all the time. So he was probably writing books or corresponding with somebody around the world
Mhm,
you know. And
mhm.
I'm sorry, I can't tell you, Paul, that what things he told us about that came from his books.
So he wasn't showy about it. I mean, he didn't say, "Well, here's a book that I'm working on."
No, 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 no. He
Yeah.
was very modest.
How about there's a person here called iPad, which is an interesting name. iPad says has an inside track here. Says, "Tell us about the monk with the bright face."
With the what?
Bright face. iPad, if you're out there, would you like to pose the question for yourself?
Well,
iPad,
I'll answer.
Earth calling iPad, iPad. No, Dan, does that
Well,
ring any bells?
yeah, yeah. The simply professed monk that came to sit with us novices one time and talk. Um, I can't remember his name, but anyway, what struck me about him, I never saw anything like it before, but his face was like it was lit up with light,
Hmm.
and it was I never forgot that. Um, I think it was the Holy Spirit, but I don't know, but it was it was light. It was all light. I don't know if you can picture that, but he's the one who went to Chile and who cut his arm in the woods.
Hmm. I'm looking at the questions here again.
Yeah.
Uh, Carol, you had a couple of questions for Dan. Would you like to ask them for yourself? I'm not having much luck here, am I? Oh, Carol, I'll unmute you and see if that helps.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Hi. Very interesting. I'm really interested in this evening's presentation because I've been reading Merton, and I've just Merton for many years, but I just joined the society. So I was wondering, like this, I know it was a long time ago, but what stands out for you being a major, significant experience from being there, and what was the most challenging, would you say, as you reflect about those years?
Um, well, one of the things that was challenging for me was beating myself with that discipline thing. Um, and other than that, I think that in the beginning, especially when I first went there, um, I wasn't used to working so hard, and that was very difficult for me to work like they do. They worked hard, and to come from a life of leisure as I had almost, and to do that was difficult for me in the beginning. But of course, you get used to it. You build up some muscles or whatever. But and what else was challenging? I don't know.
How about something that you liked best? She was asking also.
Oh, something that I liked best.
Yeah.
Um, I like the liturgy of the hours. I mean, matins was kind of rough because it was so early in the morning, but I liked the liturgy of the hours, and I liked the talks that Father Lewis gave us. You know, um, he was very good. I liked we went to mass. And Father Lewis was the president, the presider, and I always enjoyed his masses. It was just the novices and him, in our we had a little chapel. Um, so I enjoyed that. Um, what else? I got used to a lot of the things that might have been a problem. I mean, losing so much sleep. There was a time, this was challenging. There was a time when each of us had to go during the night all around the area, the monastery grounds and the monastery itself. It was called a fire watch. And we had to go with an instrument that we clicked at each fire watch station. We would click to show that we were there. And the purpose of our being at all these different places was to ensure that there was no fire, because there was possibility for it. There was candles burning and stuff like that. So that was during the night, and then I had to get up in the morning without having had much sleep and go down and do matins, which was so early in the morning. So
Mhm.
that was challenging.
Mhm.
Um, but
Mary Smith, if I unmute you, would you like to ask your question?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Oh, were you there when his friend Dan Welsh was there? Or
what year?
that I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, he was his like I don't know that he was his teacher. They go back to Columbia University.
Yeah. 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 I know the name. I've heard the name, but I
Yeah.
don't think I was there because there was never a time that he was not with us because a friend that was visiting or something like that that I can think
How
of.
about how about James Finley?
Well, Jay Finley was a monk, right? He took solemn vows, and I don't think he was there when I was there. But I told Greg the unusual thing that happened to me was that the buddy of mine from high school, we went down in as not seniors but juniors in high school, and his name was James Finley, and
Yeah.
he went down to the Abbey, but he had nothing to do with the other James Finley, But
Yes. Uh, Mike
Thank you.
Mike Brennan, I was going to ask you if you want to make a commercial about the work that you do for the society, because
I would just,
there may be some folks here that would like to get in touch with you.
well, anybody who would like to know more about the Merton Society can go to merton.org and learn all they wish. But I just want to thank Dan for his memories. And if your nephew and his family still lives in Chicago, we would love to have you speak to our chapter if you ever come to Chicago. And I'll be sure to get that information to you. We'll
I'm
make
uh,
a
I'm sorry to say that they don't live there anymore.
Oh, I'm so
Yeah,
sorry too.
But
yeah,
Chicago is still there.
If Chicago is there and we can still have
Well,
you.
we have a Pope from Chicago.
We do
Okay.
indeed.
That's
We
it.
do indeed. But I just want to thank you very much for your presentation. It
Oh,
was
you're very
wonderful.
welcome. It was my pleasure to meet everybody.
Uh,
Um,
I was
and
going to,
yeah, go ahead.
Dan, we're about at the end of our hour, and I want to thank you also. And maybe you'll come back and visit with us again sometime, because I'm sure there are other folks that would have other questions to ask you as well.
Sure.
I wanted to share with you as far as technology goes. You know, Merton had some mixed feelings about technology, but today I went on to Chat GPT, you know, that thing that they talk about, like super duper artificial intelligence. And I put in a question about um, what years was Thomas Merton novice master? And what came back was, here's a powerful and reflective quote from Thomas Merton during his time as novice master, found in his journals and teachings from that period. And then there's a quote that it says here is from Thomas Merton's Notes for Novices, circa late 1950s, which would be about when you were there. And this is the quote, because I think it applies to you very well. The quote is, "The novice must become detached not only from things, but from people, and even from himself. He must learn to let go, to trust God completely. In this detachment, he does not become cold or indifferent, but capable of deeper love,
Mhm,
love rooted in God, not in need.
mhm,
Rooted in God, but not in need." And then it goes on to say, this captures the heart of his formation philosophy, that true freedom and love come from radical surrender and self-emptying. And then it says, would you like more quotes like this, or something from the inner experience, or seeds of contemplation? So ChatGPT, you know, does some good work.
mm. Yeah, sounds like.
Okay.
Um, I don't know if I should say this. Do we have any time?
Go ahead.
I don't want to offend anybody, but Thomas Merton, he had his 2 feet firmly on the ground. And when the diocese sent a request to him to um, to give them some suggestions for, for prayers and the intercessory prayers at Mass, um, he sent back some suggestions. I'm not sure if I think he prayed for the Jewish people too, but one of the things he said, I hate to say it, I don't want to offend anybody, but this is what he said. He said, "Well, and while you're at it, you could pray uh, for Tom Merton, the poor bastard."
I'm going to mute you now, Dan.
Well,
Oh, you know, Dan, let's close with this. We were talking about Dom James's motto, you know, the
yes, yes,
motto.
yes, yeah.
Maybe if you would share that and what you've developed your own motto based on
Okay,
that one, and then we'll close
sure.
with that, okay?
Okay, sure. Don James' motto was "All for Jesus, through Mary, with a smile." That was his motto. And I adopted that by including St. Joseph. And so my motto is all for Jesus, through Mary and St. Joseph, with a smile.
And there's that smile, man. There's another shining face. Dan, thanks so much for joining with us,
You're
and
very
really,
welcome. And
really
thank you
appreciate it.
for the opportunity.
All right, God bless. Bye. Good night.
God
Good
bless.
night, everyone. Good night.
Good
Oh, I should
night.
say, if anybody wants to join our monthly group, just shoot me an email and I'll add you to our list. Thanks again. Good night, everyone.
Good night, all.